Hello, second graders, and welcome to our phonics lesson for today. So the past few days, I've asked you all to kind of think of fancier and cooler ways to say things, whether it would be my vocabulary and the words that I use when I'm teaching, whether it's the names of the classroom jobs that we have in our classroom, or the names of the areas in our classroom, like our desk and like the cubby area. You all have reminded me of Jerome because of the way you collected words that you heard. So you guys did a really great job with coming up with new, different, fancier words for a lot of things that we say, that I will say in the classroom. So you guys did a really great job. You guys are really doing a great job word collecting. One thing I loved is that you were all really fearless spellers as well. So you may not have been sure how to spell certain things or certain words, but you never gave up and you tried your very best. So pat yourselves on the back for that, because that was a really great job. So a lot of great words that I might use when I'm teaching. If we end up coming back to the classroom at some point this year, like maybe those are some things that I can do as well. I could start calling the cubby areas a lot of the suggestions that you gave me. So just really, really great work. One thing that I wanted to remind you of, that when spelling bigger, longer, and more complex, which means harder, more complex words, it is very, very helpful to break those words into parts, right? So if I'm thinking of the word distribute, right, like you distribute candy on Halloween, you distribute papers to people, right? If when you think of the word distribute and you would like to write that down at some point whenever you're writing, really break apart that word. So distribute is a great word to kind of use as an example of breaking it into parts, right? So ute, right? So breaking that part up into small, or breaking that word up into smaller parts, right? Dis. What sounds do I hear in dis? D-I-S, right? Dis. Trib. Trib. So T-R, right? Tr-I-B. So I and B. And then distribute. U-T, right? So U-T, and then there's actually the E at the end because that makes that U sound a long vowel sound, right? So distribute. So did you see how I kind of broke up the word distribute into smaller parts and then figured out what sounds I heard in those smaller parts? That's something that I would like to see you guys continue to do when you're trying to spell longer and harder words. You guys have been doing a really great job with that. So keep it up, and that's just a little strategy that you can use as well. Today, I want to teach you that books are one of the best sources to collect new words. It helps as you read to really understand what the book is saying, because a lot of the times, understanding the message of the story helps you figure out what the word seems to mean. So I want you to take a moment and listen to how Jerome learned more words. So this was a part from the Word Collectors book that I had you guys watch the read aloud to a few days ago. So I'm just going to read you some parts of this book, and I want you to see how Jerome learned more words. What was one way that he learned more words? So it says on this page right here, he collected words he read. Certain words popped off the page. Short and sweet words, two-syllable treats, and multi-syllable words that sounded like little songs. Okay, so on this page, he saw words like geometry, guacamole, kaleidoscope, wonderful, and symphony. Okay, so great job. So that's how he kind of learned some words. That's how one way that he did a lot of word collecting was reading through books and seeing different words that he probably had never seen before, right? So earlier this year, you guys learned that the way that the word is used in a sentence will often give you a clue to what it might mean. Okay, and that's kind of like what Jerome did a little bit. He was reading, and he kind of noticed what his book, the books that he was reading were about, and was able to kind of use those hard words and figure out what they meant. So here's another example. So this is a book called Where the Sidewalk Ends by Shel Silverstein. It's actually just like a book of poems. And some of these poems are actually really funny, so I highly recommend this book. But I wanted to kind of show you another example of how you can use the text or what you're reading to really find out what certain words mean. Okay, so I'm going to show you this poem right here. So this is a poem called Orchestra. Okay, and I'm going to show you how I know that, I mean, orchestra is a hard word in and of itself, so I'm going to show you exactly how I know that the word is orchestra and that this poem is titled Orchestra. So I'm going to start reading it, and I'm going to come across some really difficult words that seem a little challenging, and I'm going to think about how I can use the information from the poem to figure out what those words mean. Okay, so it starts off by saying, so you haven't got a drum, just beat your belly. So I haven't got a horn, I'll play my nose. So we haven't any, and I'm struggling with this word right here. We haven't any, it looks like it's spelled Cymbals. So I'm thinking back, I'm going to reread it again. So you haven't got a drum, just beat your belly. So I haven't got a horn, I'll play my nose. So we haven't any, I still don't really know what that word means. So I'm actually going to continue reading and see if there's any more clues within the other words to help me find out what this word is. We haven't any blank, we'll just slap our hands together. So I'm thinking it's all about, it seems to be all about instruments, right? Or like a band or something like that, because it's saying something about playing a horn, beating a drum, and I'm trying to think, like, what instrument would you have to clap your hands with? And the thing that comes to mind is a cymbal, right? Cymbals. Sometimes you see in like marching bands, you see people with cymbals, one on each hand, just kind of clapping them together, right? So let's see if cymbals work. So cymbals, yeah, that definitely is. That's definitely the word. So we haven't any cymbals. We'll just slap our hands together. Definitely sounds right. Definitely makes sense within the story. We're going to keep reading now. We'll just slap our hands together. And though there may be orchestras that sound a little better with their fancy, shiny, so I'm thinking about what is fancy and shiny. Well, again, we're thinking about a band, right? People who play a lot of instruments, right? So maybe this word is instruments, right? Are some instruments very shiny and fancy looking? Yeah, a lot of instruments come in different sizes and shapes. They make different sounds, and they also, some of them are made out of different materials that make them look really shiny. So with their fancy, shiny instruments, that sounds right and makes sense, that cost an awful lot. Hey, we're making music twice as good by playing what we've got. So the last thing I want to do is I want to go back to that word orchestras. It's in the title, but it's also in the poem. And though there may be orchestras that sound a little better. Yeah, that kind of makes sense, that word orchestras right there, because, you know, they're talking about their orchestra, and maybe there are some other orchestras that sound better, right? So that word fits into that sentence perfectly. And though there may be orchestras that sound a little better with their fancy shiny instruments that cost an awful lot, hey, we're making music twice as good by playing what we've got. So that kind of makes sense in that whole story. So were you guys able to kind of see and did you see how my understanding of the whole story and what it's about helped me figure out the words that are a little bit hard and the ones that I was having a little bit trouble with? So we know that cymbals, right? Cymbals was one of the words that was hard for me. We know that cymbals are used by clapping your hands together, right? So when it said that in the story, I was able to understand that that word is cymbals. Right? We know that an orchestra is a group of musicians, right? So we saw a picture of two musicians. We know that the story was talking about musicians and music. So orchestra was the other word that I was having trouble with, and I was able to kind of use my clues to figure that out, right? And we know that the members of an orchestra play instruments. So I was able to figure out that word as well. So again, perfect example of how you can just read through a story and really understand what the story is talking about so that you can understand some of the words and what they mean, when you start reading them. Okay, so what I'm going to have you guys do for today for phonics is I'm going to show you this little screen right here. And so this is our assignment for today. So it says, see if you can figure out what the highlighted words mean. So I kind of wrote like a passage that I got from another book, and I'll read it to you right now, and then I'll tell you what you're going to do after. So the passage says, "The monsters grew more and more suspicious. They slunk about, depressed or delirious, accusing each other of planting the flowers out of spite to spoil their paradise." So that's the passage. It'll be there for you when you open this. And the words that I want you to try and see if you can figure out what they mean are the ones that are highlighted here in yellow. Okay, so we have suspicious, slunk, and accusing. So it might help to reread this passage a few more times just so you could kind of maybe understand it a little bit. And then what you're going to do is once you think you have an idea of what each word means here, you're going to scroll down and it says write down what you think each word means. So right here, you would write down what you think the word suspicious means. Right here, you might write down what the word slunk might mean. And then right here, you're going to write down what you think the word accusing would be. And again, if you don't really have an idea of what to write down and what those words mean, go back to this text right here. Go back to the passage and reread it and see if you can use any of the other clues within the passage to help you define those words. Okay, so that's going to be our phonics lesson for today. I can't wait to see what some of you put down for your definitions or your meanings for those words in that passage. And hopefully today when you're reading your own books during independent reading, or if you go on RazKids or if you're on Lexia, hopefully you can really use context clues is what they're called. Context clues to help you read harder words. All right, everybody, so good luck today and great work, and I can't wait to see your responses for the phonics lesson. See you later.